Feeling thirsty for knowledge? Hackers on the Rocks is the podcast that mixes refreshing conversation with potent cybersecurity insights. Serving up these insights with a twist, we pair a different software vulnerability with a refreshing cocktail recipe each episode. All right, hello world and greetings all around. Our opening segment is called Get Handle Information. And here to bring you today's drink, our guest, Mr. Stephen Shaffer. Stephen, welcome.
Hey, thanks, Evan. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, tell us, what are we drinking today?
We are drinking a Paloma.
All right, what is that?
Yeah. So Paloma is tequila based. It's basically just tequila, grapefruit soda, and lime juice, and whatever twist you want to put on that. But those are the three main ingredients.
Fair enough. Now, when you make your Paloma, are there do you have a specific tequila in mind or a specific soda in mind, or just anything will do?
I'm not particular. Right. I just need something of that nature to get, me through. So that's
Understood. So
yeah.
why this drink? Like I got you clearly there the tequila advocacy is there. What's
Yeah.
is are you like a big grapefruit dude? Like how do we get to a Paloma?
No, it's just I am a tequila advocate. I do love tequila. It's I sort of stay within the realm of clear alcohol liquids if you want to denote that. But I wanted something that was a little bit different than, just your classic margarita. And This is like sort of like a nice halfway point between super sugary margarita and just straight tequila, right? So this is like right there, depending on how strong your drink is. So
Oh, we'll find out. I have followed your recipe, which we will share in the show notes, and I have mixed, and I see you have mixed as well. So, my man,
yes.
cheers! Welcome to the show.
Cheers.
Yeah,
Cheers. Thank you.
I can do it. Yeah, I like it. It's really straight tequila, and we're just pretending it's not because there's like soda in there as well. Dig it.
Right.
So while we're drinking our palomas and getting ready for the show, I guess maybe tell the audience like who you are and how you got into the research space.
Yeah. So that's a good question. I'm Steven. I work right now at Moderna as a principal security engineer. Previously worked at Peloton, and prior to that, as a contractor for the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services. So a lot of cool, fun experiences in very large environments. And really, what got me into sort of, I guess, research in general was paternity leave and having downtime to sort of read through some stuff that I had sort of neglected over my career, and sort of asking questions, why are these things the way that they are, right? And sort of going into the CVSS, vulnerability management, how are people doing this, what matters, all that stuff. And I came across EPSS, and that sort of kickstarted my interest into, um, finding methods to sort of prioritize vulnerabilities in a more efficient way, around what actually matters when you are fixing stuff.
Yeah, rock on. Well, let's pause quick for our sponsor, and then we'll get into a discussion on EPSS.
Great.
Today's episode is sponsored by Personum. Generating and collecting network traffic is easy. In many regulated industries, it's required. But what are you doing with that stored data? Personum.ai offers a detection as code engine that allows you to sift through your network data looking for behavioral abnormalities, build and even monetize threat detection solutions from data you are already collecting with Personum. Find out more at personum.ai. All right, we move on to the next segment, which we call the distillery. Stephen, we already kind of let in. So we're here to talk about EPSS. I guess let's start with what is that?
Yeah, so EPSS is the exploit prediction scoring system. And essentially what it is a machine learning model that predicts the likelihood of a CVE being exploited in the wild in the next 30 days. Um, that's a mouthful. Essentially, the way that I like to sort of view it as like, here's your CVE expected exploitation exposure, right, within the next 30 days. Like that's how you should, you know, well, let's cut that. Um, that's how you should sort of let me see if I can explain that a little bit better. Yeah. Uh, EPSS,
The tequila's going great, by the way.
it's going great. Just
All
already
right, so
losing my train of thought.
exploit prediction scoring system. What I heard, and help make sure that I'm understanding, is we have these unique tracking identifiers called CVEs that track known
Yeah.
vulnerabilities. And the EPSS team has built some kind of model that uses machine learning to
Yep.
uh, help process the likelihood of imminent exploitation based off of some things. Is that correct so far?
Yeah, and those things are, there's training data where they actually train the model on actual exploitation activity. So there's data feeds that go into the model that indicate when a CVE was exploited or detected to have exploitation activity. And we want to be clear like what exploitation activity is versus like it was exploited. It's just detecting that an exploitation attempt took place for that CVE. And so it's essentially that's why I like to call it activity. Um, and it also takes in a lot of open source threat intelligence. So we're talking about like whether or not this CVE has a Metasploit module, whether or not the CVE is on the sysakev, whether or not all the NBD data is pulled down, all the CVSS metrics are pulled down, and sort of put into this model. And the model is essentially deciding what's important, right? Like of all these data points, what is the most important indicator or of the data points it was given, what's why or like where does it sort of like sit on that scale from 0 to 1?
Got it. And I'll ask you, I think, next, um, why does it matter? What this do? But prior to that, if you can just, since you kind of illustrate a little bit of your data points and how the model is built, you mentioned sysakev, you mentioned MSF or Metasploit framework, and CVSS. Can you maybe explain what those are and why they're important to your model?
Yeah, so cysakev is the catalog run by the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency of known exploited vulnerabilities. So that's where Kev comes from, and it's essentially just a static catalog that is just continuously added to when they decide that something has been exploited, or they have information about when it was exploited. Um, Metasploit and other like offensive security tools, but Metasploit essentially is, a framework for exploitation, right? Like people write modules for it that they can figure out if there's a CVE present on a host, and they use Metasploit to basically easily exploit it, right? It's sort of like a weaponization framework.
Yep.
And then there's other, yeah, and then CVSS is the common vulnerability scoring system. It's on version 4 now. The model's trained on version 3, if I recall, or all the existing prior versions from version 4, depending on how it was scored. But yeah, that's essentially just categorizing vulnerabilities about and denoting how bad they are.
Got it. All right. So then, if I'm understanding, the model is based off of things like, have we seen this actually exploited? And so you're determining a probability of somebody getting hit by it, and it's clearly impacted if other people have gotten hit by it. You're looking at things like open source frameworks, to include the very popular, open source Metasploit framework that enables a global community of people to produce and leverage existing exploits that may or may not be used in the wild, so to speak, but at least if the capability for it to exist in the wild exists, that's relevant. And then I guess I'll call it threat data, right? Your CVSS scoring, the how severe is the bug. Um, is that
Yeah.
kind of that's the model essentially in a nutshell?
Yes and no. I mean, there. If you want a full like a breakdown of everything that goes into the model, the paper is available on archive.org. We can probably link that in the show notes if you want. And yeah, there's a breakdown of just basically everything that it ingests, including a bunch of other security tooling, and uh, like social media, like chatter, all that. So it's
Yeah.
basically just trying to ingest. you know, the most important things to sort of decipher which vulnerabilities are actually important
Got
to
it. Okay,
focus
yeah.
on.
So other things like social media mentions, like people saying, is this a
Yeah.
big deal or I've got a thing. That's kind of interesting. So if there's paper, I mean, maybe just the implementation of EPSS is this like where did it come from? Is it open sourced? Is it like is there a company behind this? Like how does this all manifest itself?
Yeah, so I was not involved in the creation of it. I'm part of the special interest group that sort of uh, advocates for its use and sort of answers questions about how to use it and all that. But it was presented at Black Hat in 2019 um, by I believe Jay Jacobs and Mike Reutman. And then since then, the special interest group was formed under First. And version 1 was publicly available, I think, in 2021, version 2 in 2022, version 3 in 2023, version 4 is currently in development.
Okay, and first is who?
Oh, geez.
I
Um,
actually look this one up if you need it.
yeah, it's the Forum of Incident Response and Security Teams.
My man,
So it's like
use the test.
an international, yeah, international incident response community, and they have a bunch of special interest groups there. They put on conferences. Um, And so myself and Jay, we run the EPSS special interest group.
Got it. And I guess you kind of started the conversation with your background, how you've gone from like large entity to large entity. So this is clearly shaped your perspective is shaped from a perspective of large enterprises. Is that the primary consumer of this? Is that who needs CBSS or actually EPSS?
Um, I don't think so. I think anyone could use it. It's a public global model, right? Essentially, you can view it as this is in the wild activity that's being detected across global networks of exploitation. Like this is the exploitation activity that's occurring right in the wild. There are data partners that sit there with EPSS, giving them data and donate data to sort of build this model, and that's not available to the public. But the output of the model is to sort of say like, hey, of the model that we trained on, or of the data that we trained on, here's all these new CVEs coming out. This is what the model thinks of those things. And
Yeah,
so like essentially you can do that, at a small enterprise, large enterprise. The more data that you have, the more complex things get, obviously. Um, so yeah, it's easier to ingest and probably use in a smaller enterprise because it's a very strong signal versus other things like in a large enterprise where you have to take into account a lot of other like environment data.
yeah. I've never had the pleasure of working for a large enterprise, so I can't speak with experience, but I've certainly talked to and worked with people who are. I guess maybe let's flip to that perspective then. So now I'm a believer, I'm an adopter, I'm pulling in the results of your model to my environment, large or small. Maybe talk to like why is it important to me? What do I do with it? And
Yeah.
yeah,
So it really depends on, what you care about, right? When you're running a vulnerability management program or just, worried about security in general, are you worried about every single bad thing that the media is coming out with and telling you about, or every single CVSS high and above CVE, which is about 56% of CVEs? Um, you can't. It's people can't do that. It's physically impossible. Most folks are only really patching about 10% of their backlog every month. Um,
wow.
so you really have to prioritize what you're going to fix. And EPSS is a method to sort of do that, right? Like if you take the raw score and you rank order them about with what's in your environment, you're clearly going to see which ones are scoring high, and it's going to be a a smaller percentage than what you think of. Yeah, I think there's like I'm not really good with the numbers here, but it's a very small percentage of things that actually score relatively high because in reality, only about 6% of CVEs are exploited in the wild. And
Yeah.
so,
All right. So there's all of these bugs out there, right? And we've had past guests say like the number of CVEs is rising every year, and the idea,
Yeah.
which we could talk about if you want. It sounds like you want to jump in, but yeah, have a swig of that tequila first, man. But
Yeah.
so there's all these bugs, and I think just trying to wrap my head around what you said is like some people strategize on is it ranked as highly impactful, like a high CVSS score, meaning like if it was taken over, if it was impact, man, now I'm
If it was exploited.
yeah, if it was exploited, then really, really, really bad things happen because the severity
Yeah.
is high, right? It's unauthenticated, it's remote, it's magic packet, like whatever. And so some people prioritize those, even if like the actual exploitability is hard because of the way the network's configured or the accesses or what have you. And so this is maybe a different model that tries to rank an organization's likelihood of actual exploitability versus just one
Yeah.
angle. Is that kind of how you think
Yeah,
about
I have a lot of different like analogies for this. And I think one of my like nerdiest analogies is if you've seen The Matrix Reloaded and you have that big hallway of doors.
that? That's
Oh
not a real
God.
movie. Sorry, there was
That's
other.
not a real movie.
Yeah, no, no, that's been wiped from at
Y-
least my memory. Sorry,
Um,
keep carrying
well,
on though. Yeah, all right. There was this thing called Matrix Part Three, and
oh God.
uh,
Well, part two.
all
I
right,
mean,
Part Two. All right, all these
it's
doors. All right, yeah,
all these doors, right? And you're in that hallway as an attacker, right? And you don't know. You can kind of figure out what's behind them in some places, right?
yeah.
But you can try and you don't know what's behind that door, right? The defender does know what's behind that door, and the defender needs to know which doors to protect, and also which doors are likely to be opened, right? And so we need to understand sort of environmentally, right? Like in our organization, where's all the things that hackers would want to sort of, or I'm sorry, attackers would want to um take advantage of or use, right? Like where's all of our data? Where is what are the things that are revenue generating for the business
Yeah.
and all that? And then so if you can pair that with so that's like a nice qualitative look at impact, right? And then if you pair that with, EPSS, which is the likelihood that this is going to be exploited in the wild, you have a nice picture of risk. And so for me, it's sort of like, okay, I know all of these doors are going to be opened in the wild. Which doors are in my environment and which doors lead to the stuff that'll actually impact me. So that's a
Interesting step. No,
kind
it's
of
good.
a
It
tequila
makes sense.
shitty analogy, but
No, we're good, man. It's just picked a shitty movie, but the analogy was great. Yeah. All right, so let me back up. Something you said I think earlier was pretty fascinating, and regardless whether the stat is accurate or not, but it was something along the lines of like 10% of patches are actually adopted at any given moment. Maybe I'm just coming at this from the perspective of like I don't know, like I'm a dude who works from home and like I own a computer and it's just set to auto download and auto implement patches. Like why is patching such a hard thing? Why don't organizations just have everything on auto update and call it a day? Because most people aren't really running, custom firmware in like a SCADA environment where a patch might really break something, or are they?
I think you underestimate how many legacy systems are out there, right? I mean, there's
Okay,
a
yeah,
lot of yeah, there's a lot of, you've talked about embedded OS, you talk about OT, you talk about all these like there's a lot of things that are sort of business critical that are running on either end of life or end of service operating systems or software that frankly, businesses haven't, like they deem the operational risk of um of losing that, right? Like they almost think of like, I don't tolerate that operational risk, and like they don't have a plan to migrate off of it, and
yep.
so I'm going to accept the security risk, right, and sort of keep that going. But to your point, like yes, like having a strong patch management strategy broadly is a relative it's a good thing, and you should be moving towards that automated patching. But in practice, that's like kind of hard to do. And also, you're going to face multiple barriers across many different teams who are going to be resistant to that, just because. Um, I mean, there's a plethora of reasons for that, but it's It's mostly like if it's something that's like, like a dev box or something like that, and they don't care if something breaks, patch it automatically, right? But if there's more concern about what happens if there's an operational risk if this patch is bad, right? And it brings the system down. Do we want to continuously take that risk every month? Or
Yeah.
do we
Okay.
do or do we do this like in maintenance windows and do it less often or what have you? But I mean, there's a broad spectrum of that in my, in my experience.
Yeah, I mean, I believe that defenders need to know what their environment is vulnerable to, right? I'm sure there's a vested interest
Yeah.
in knowing, and to your point, even predicting where is my next actual bad day going to come from. So I mean, you've sold me on the idea, maybe on the implementation side, right? So the only thing that's kind of coming to my mind now is if it, only because we had another guest that talked about this. If the model in some part is reliant on external sources like CVE, and then the derivative
Yeah.
CSS, and then like what happens when like the National Vulnerability Database,
Yeah.
it's had some challenges, right? It's gone dark for quite
It's
some
been
time.
degraded.
Thank you. Okay, it's been
Yeah.
behind it. So like I guess this concept of like you have this AI model that takes in stuff and then tells you the future, which I got, but that number crunching is based on the assumption that the data coming in is, timely and accurate. And I guess
Yep.
how concerned are we about like garbage in, garbage out?
Yeah, it's a good question. And I mean, there's been some, there has been some degradation of the version 3 model just because of the NVD. It's not like, we can't really like pinpoint that, but there has been some level of degradation from the data coming in. Essentially, like these things the model is trained to your point, like expecting these uh, data sources coming in. If one of them falls off, essentially, like you're turning off that feature of the model, right? Like it's no longer going to be able to use that in its calculation of how likely is this to be exploited. Um, and so, the best way to sort of address that is to retrain the model on other data sources, right? And so that's what's currently happening right now. And hopefully, that's sort of mitigated in the future. And I think, the version 3 model has been out since 2023, and it's kind of old at this point. Models like I'm not a machine learning person yet. I'm sort of still learning there.
Yeah,
But
we all.
yeah, you can measure like, how well a model is performing. And you can see that degradation like in a graph. And I'm not going to get into that. That's a really deep subject that I'm not comfortable, going into yet. But essentially, you can see that, and then you can also see, how well like a different model would perform opposed to that with different data sources, right? So like there can be adjustments made, on the fly or at certain intervals to sort of keep the model in tune with reality, because that's really all we're doing. We're trying to measure the reality of the situation, or reality in general. Um, and reality is constantly changing. So yeah.
Maybe since we've I think established that this is essentially, it's a foundation or a nonprofit, and the model relies on partnerships, and you are a part of this, advocacy championing group. Maybe can you talk a little bit about how anyone who's listening could perhaps get involved or contribute or help?
Yeah, absolutely. So uh you can go to the first website and look for the special interest groups and just request to join the EPSS SIG. Um, there's like a form you fill out, and basically we want to know why you want to come join and what do you want to contribute, stuff like that, just so we have a better idea of what people expect out of that group. You can also just uh, come to VulnCon in Raleigh, North Carolina in April. Um, which is run by First, and will have basically all things vulnerability management, from CVSS. Just like it's run by the CVE program and First. Myself and Jay will be there talking EPSS. So there's that, and then really just staying tuned to the model version 4 coming out, which we should announce in the next couple of weeks here.
Yeah, rock on. Additionally, I just want to make sure that we kind of run this really thoroughly. The organization itself, do you have like members? Like, is it donations? Like, do people just buy T-shirts? Like, how do you guys financially supported?
Yeah. So the model is actually financed by, like, the version 3 models is financed by a firm called Scientia Institute right now, which is a sort of like a security data science company, co-founded by Jay. And so the model, like, it's basically at cost, essentially. And then first is I believe a nonprofit, and there's no cost to joining. Essentially, you can sign up and be a member, and just participate. The whole point of the SIG and first in general, I think, is just to advance knowledge around security.
Well, look, if you have T-shirts, I'll buy them. I guess that's kind of what I'm wondering. If there's any listeners that
That's a good idea.
look, VolnCon, I think I'd imagine that conference has a ticket price. So that sounds like a good way of
That does. Yeah,
support.
that's a good way
Yeah,
of supporting.
yeah,
Yeah.
okay. I think I feel pretty good about this. Maybe the only question I'll ask in closing, and I don't know if it's in closing or if this is opening up like a whole can of worms, but typically when I think of like, oh, there's a problem here and we're going to solve it. We're going to solve it, nonprofit, open source, and there's going to be partners and everything. Somebody usually rolls around and is like, I can make money off of this thing. And so I guess, is that true? Like, are there for-profit ventures trying to do the same thing? Are you doing it collaboratively? Is it competitive? Like, is there a reason why somebody should perhaps consider paying for this versus just pulling the feed? Like, there's a lot of questions, but you can
Yeah.
take them in any order.
Yeah. There are definitely folks out there who see the potential in using machine learning in general within cybersecurity, right? This is just one facet of that. We're talking about specifically exploitation, but there's a lot of opportunity there, and I'm sure smarter people than myself are going to figure that out. Um, but yeah, I mean, there are, like, I would expect over the next decade that we see a lot more cybersecurity companies leveraging machine learning. I mean, you think about CrowdStrike, they do that right now, right? And in their malware analysis, like, it's going to be more stuff like that, but not necessarily exposing like, details about the model, right? Just basically saying, customers, here's the output, trust us.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah,
and I think what differentiates EPSS right now from those other models is essentially it's as open as it really can be without sort of violating the privacy of the people giving the data, right? Like, donating the data. Um, so
yeah. Everything you've said thus far, I think, it's kind of like Jack Dorsey with Blue Sky, right? Like, this is at some point a public utility, and
mhm.
um, that's why I just want to make sure that our listeners have enough information where, again, if they want to get involved, and make sure that the public utility remains a public utility, that they can kind of chip in and get involved where they can.
Yeah.
Look, last call. Anything you want the audience to know about EPSS? Maybe a question I didn't ask.
Um, EPSS is kind of it. The one thing that is kind of cool, I think, with it is that because it's a probability or a likelihood that's being output, that's a real number that you can do math on, right? You can take that probability and that likelihood and put it into, say, your own model or your own sort of calculation for how you're thinking about risk internally. And I think there's a lot of opportunity for folks to do that. One of the things that you can do with EPSS is scale it. So instead of just looking at it at a CVE, you can look at, what's the combined probability of this asset being exposed to exploitation activity, and then you can also go up the chain, right? You go to the network, you go to the, the department, right? You can really like scale it up without really having to do much work. And one of the things that I'm sort of exploring right now in my research is that an effective measurement for risk? Right? Can we look at the distribution of the grouped EPSS at the asset level and combine that with our, impact asset attributes and have some sort of view of, hey, this likelihood of exposure to exploitation and this asset hosts this type of data on it? Like, is that a signal that we should be paying attention to, essentially?
Got it. Actually, let me you're bringing up a point that I think I didn't raise. I want to make sure that the listeners have distinction on, right? So if I'm using this, I'm bought in, I'm using it in my organization. Is it a one-way street where you're just giving me a list of prioritized things, or am I saying like I have, I don't know, this computer with this operating system and this patch level, and then you tell me like, all right, fix this patch once or first or whatever, and I listen to you. Do I then get to like, is it bi-directional or is it, you know what I'm saying? Like how would I actually use this in
I
practice in my entity?
Yeah. Yeah, so it's so the one caveat is the score actually changes on a daily basis because the model is run daily. Um, because like I said earlier, the state of reality changes daily, things happen,
Sure.
things change. So there's that caveat, right? But essentially, the way that the simplest way to implement it, in my opinion, is just enriching your existing CVE, vulnerability backlog, right? With
Got
what's
it.
the EPSS score of all of these things. And then if you like the simplest thing is just to rank order them and be
Mhm.
like, let's just go hit, the top 10% or something like that. And then, but what I talked about earlier with grouping those things, you can also group them by like, if you have this data available from a vendor, um, of what the remediation is for this CVE, you can then group by remediation and say, what's the most impactful remediation activity that we can do to lower our risk? Um, so, like to your point, like there is some sort of feedback loop that just have to happen, right? Like that happens the next day, something in the, some signal that the model ingests shoots a CVE up to the top, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that happens, right? Like that's it's I and so this sort of prompts people like, okay, if we're going to use this for looking at risk or like how we sort of, SLA respond to things, right? Um, that doesn't really work with this, or at least like it doesn't work in a like in practice, it's like it's sort of like a moving target, right? And so one of the things I sort of say to people is, yeah, you might violate SLAs, but at least you have a clearer picture or at least reduced uncertainty about what your risk is, and you can then adapt your program to that, right? I think what's more important is that we are looking at the things that are actually risky to an organization versus, you know, a vendor or a CVSS score comes out and says this is critical, this is high, fix this in this amount of time when you could be doing that but the EPSS score like could be super low on it, so like is that actually worth your time? And
Yeah, no, I get
the
it.
argument is no.
Look,
So
I appreciate it. Thank you for your time. Stephen, where can people go to find out more about you, your work, anything you mentioned today?
yeah, you can hit me up on LinkedIn. I'm Stephen Dash Shaffer there. I have a Medium blog, stevenschafer.io, that I sort of write there when I have time. But yeah, feel free to chat with me. I love talking about this stuff, and feel free to come join the SIG, and we'd love to have you.
Yeah, clearly, I appreciate it. It's always great to have members from the community kind of come out and we talk a lot about on the show like exploit classes and how are bad guys getting in, and I think this is a good.
That is one of the model inputs too.
Yeah, look, this is a well, all
So
right.
there you
Oh
go.
man, I don't need your machine learning listening to the show. I'm good with my 10 listeners. But I think look, I appreciate your time, and you clearly speak about this with passion, and I think it's a good vulnerability adjacent topic. So I'm glad we were able to kind of cover it on the show. So look, Stephen, thank you for your time,
Yeah.
and a pleasure learning about EPSS. Cheers.
Yeah. Likewise. Cheers.